The greed and avarice of one corrupt official in Indonesia have destroyed his own life. Curses and divine punishment await those who steal, plunder, and betray the people. The repugnant wrath of God's messengers lies in wait to punish them. In a city once hailed as the people's jewel, a grandiose government office stood, its towering pillars resembling colossal ivory tusks piercing the ashen sky. Behind its grand entrance sat a man named Darmadi Satrio, an official long celebrated as the father of development by media outlets. He had bought with stacks of tainted cash. Darmadi was no ordinary bureaucrat. He was a carefully curated symbol of prosperity: luxury cars, gleaming wristwatches, charity galas staged solely for newspaper photos. Yet behind his warm smile, his hands were always busy, clawing away at public funds, shredding budgets sheet by sheet like a starved rat in a granary. Every infrastructure project, from roads to hospitals to disaster relief, bore traces of vanished money. But the weary masses were too exhausted to question, and the law enforcers too well fed to care. One gloomy evening, as Darmadi lounged in his antique teakwood chair, gift from a contractor under his patronage, a black grasshopper alighted on his shoulder, tiny, almost imperceptible. He brushed it away absently, dismissing it as nothing. He didn't know that evening marked the beginning of something he could never shake off, no matter how thick the walls of power he built around himself. In the shadows of his opulent office, something faint began to creep, as if a presence, long dormant, was stirring from the abyss he himself had dug with his own greed, and the sky above the city began to change. That night, the wind blew strangely through the city. It was no ordinary wind carrying the scent of rain or damp earth. This was a heavy, dry wind laden with the odor of rotting sawdust and something sharper, like the stench of long-concealed decay. Darmody sat alone in his office. The crystal chandelier above swayed gently, casting elongated shadows across the walls. Scattered across his desk were documents for a new project, a city park development whose budget he had already slashed in half, the difference siphoned into his own pockets. Then a faint sound. Click, 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 like thousands of tiny feet dragging across the marble floor. He looked up. Nothing. The room was empty. Shaking his head, he chuckled to himself. Just a rat. Perhaps, he muttered. But when he glanced beneath the desk, his neck stiffened. A black grasshopper, larger than the one from earlier that evening, crawled slowly between his feet. Then another, and another. Within moments, there were 5, small, yet moving in eerie unison, forming an unnatural pattern as if dancing around him. Panicked, Darmody crushed one under his shoe. Crunch. The tiny body burst, oozing a thick, black fluid that clung to his expensive leather sole. Strangely, the smell was overpowering, a nauseating mix of kerosene and spoiled blood. Darmody held his breath. Then from behind a cracked wall in the corner of the room, he heard it. A whisper, faint, rasping, yet unmistakable. "We are still hungry." His shoulders trembled. For the first time, a sliver of fear slithered through his chest. Not fear of the courts, nor of journalists, but of something older, wilder, and far hungrier. Outside the window, thousands of black grasshoppers began to darken the sky. That night, Darmody walked home with hurried steps. His sleek government car glided smoothly away, leaving behind the government building, which now looked gloomier than usual, like an ancient giant rotting from within. When he arrived home, the gate guards bowed deeply, but Darmody sensed something strange in their gaze, as if they were holding themselves back from staring too long. Darmody's house was a small palace. A vast yard, a koi pond, ornate garden lights, and large glass windows reflecting his silhouette. But tonight, as his footsteps crunched along the stone path to the front door, strange noises began to echo again. Click, 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 the sound of thousands of tiny feet. Yet when he turned, only the night wind rustled through the leaves. Entering the living room, he was met with an unsettling silence. Usually the house was filled with his family's laughter, but tonight, his wife and children were vacationing out of town. Darmody was alone, or at least he thought he was. He turned on all the lights. The corners of the room were empty. Yet, For some reason, the smell of damp earth and rotting wood grew sharper, stinging his nostrils. Breathing heavily, Darmadi walked to his bedroom. All he wanted was a hot shower, sleep, and to forget these strange shadows. But when he opened the bathroom door, his body froze. The entire bathroom wall, from floor to ceiling, was covered in black grasshoppers. Not one or two, thousands. Their tiny bodies crawled slowly, filling every crevice, rustling like a whispering black tide. Darmadi screamed. He stumbled backward, slipped, and fell onto the corridor floor. As he tried to stand, he felt something on his back. The grasshoppers were now crawling over his skin, pinching, nibbling, as if tasting the sins embedded in his blood. In a frenzy, he ran outside. But in the yard, beneath the garden lights, he saw a sight that made his knees buckle. The entire lawn had turned into a field of grasshoppers, black, pulsating, moving. They stared at him, millions of tiny, hollow yet demanding eyes, as if saying, "We are here for you." The night sky split open, and from the darkness, a new swarm descended like black rain. That night became the first night that never truly ended for Darmadi, because from then on, he could never sleep without hearing the whispers of thousands of grasshoppers gnawing at his soul. The next morning, Darmadi woke up shivering. Not from the cold, but from something deeply wrong in his skin. When he opened his eyes, his bedroom was in disarray, sheets tangled, pillows scattered, and the lingering smell of damp earth still hanging in the air. But worse, as he sat up and threw off the blanket, his eyes widened in horror. His legs, from his calves down to his soles, were covered in small black stains, like irregular patches of rot spreading beneath his skin, as if something was eating him from the inside. Panicked, Darmadi grabbed his phone, ready to call his private doctor. But when the screen lit up, what he saw left him frozen. His wallpaper, a happy family photo in the garden, had changed. The faces of his family, including his own, were now obscured by a swarm of black grasshoppers crawling over them, smothering their smiles in thick shadows. The phone slipped from his hand. Darmadi gasped. He rubbed his eyes, trying to convince himself it was just a hallucination. But when he turned to the full-length mirror in the corner of the room, a far more terrifying sight awaited him. His reflection was no longer his own. The mirror showed an old, withered man, his face, neck, and hands covered in black splotches. On his shoulders, tiny grasshoppers perched motionless, shifting slowly like parasites unwilling to let go. Darmadi screamed. He punched the mirror. Cracks spiderwebbed across it, fracturing his reflection into 1,000 corrupted versions, each one swarmed by grasshoppers. In blind panic, he ran outside, only to be met with a sight that turned his blood to ice. The neighbors were watching him. They stood on the sidewalk, whispering, pointing, and in their eyes, Darmadi saw something worse than scorn. Disgust, fear, revulsion, as if they could see something on him, something invisible yet pulsating, crawling, blackening everything that was once smooth and clean. The following days turned into a living nightmare for Darmadi. His body became increasingly covered in black, patches, starting from his legs and arms, creeping up to his neck and parts of his face. The tiny locusts seemed to multiply around him, swarming out from the closet, from under his pillow, from between clean clothes, even from tiny holes in the walls of his house. There was no safe place. He tried going to the hospital, but the moment he entered the waiting room, everyone slowly backed away from him. A nurse who was about to call his name suddenly held her breath, looked down and whispered to her colleague. Even the usually friendly doctor only stared at him in disgust, refusing to touch him. Every time Darmadi spoke, a foul stench seeped through his breath, a strange mix of damp earth and rotting flesh. No medicine was prescribed. No diagnosis was given. Just empty stares and a stale suggestion. "Just rest, sir. Pray more." Leaving the hospital, despair consumed him. He tried calling his friends, fellow officials, business partners, people who once fought to flatter him for projects and positions. But his phone only echoed with endless ringing tones that were never answered. One by one, those names vanished from his call log as if he had never existed, as if the world was slowly erasing him, as if the world wanted to bury him alive. His nights grew more terrifying. In his sleep, he dreamed of being trapped in an endless sea of black locusts, his body floating, dragged, slowly devoured without ever dying. In every corner of his nightmare, whispers echoed, "This is just the beginning, Darmadi. Not enough yet. Not enough." And when he woke up, new patches always appeared on his skin, more and more, deeper and deeper. Darmadi's body was no longer an ordinary human body. It had become a nest, a living decay, and those locusts, like messengers of a curse, were never satisfied. That day, Darmadi woke with a heaviness in his body, as if something slithered beneath his skin. With trembling hands, he unbuttoned his shirt before the mirror. What he saw nearly made him vomit. Beneath the skin of his belly, once smooth and plump from luxury, now protruded small, shifting lumps, alive, as though something crawled inside him. He clawed at his skin with his nails, desperate to stop the burning itch, but from the scratches oozed not blood, but tiny locusts, leaping forth like living clots of darkness. Darmadi screamed. His body, the same one once adored at galas and charity balls, had become an incubator for blackened creatures, parasites. Birthed from his own greed and sin, panicked, he stumbled into the yard, seeking help, gasping for air. Yet the world beyond his home had changed. The garden grass withered. Trees stood barren without cause. The sky above his house, perpetually storm-laden, as if the black clouds had settled solely over his roof. And worse, not a single soul remained. The neighbors who once bustled about, the children who rode bicycles, all had vanished, as if the entire neighborhood had fled the curse festering inside Darmadi. A rustling sound rose from the ground. When he looked down, he saw them. A sea of black locusts, millions, crawling from cracks in the earth, from invisible holes, from the shadows of dead trees. They swirled around him, slow, deliberate, encircling him like a ritual. And at the vortex's center stood Darmadi, alone, his body now a living nest for sins beyond redemption. The locusts did not bite to kill. They gnawed slowly, eroding his pride, chewing the remnants of his humanity, devouring him centimeter by centimeter, never granting him death. And with every locust that emerged, another whisper hissed, "One more sin. Your debt remains still far from repaid." Darmadi no longer remembered the last time he slept. Or perhaps he thought he was awake when, in truth, he had long been trapped in a living nightmare. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it. An endless field, drenched in a downpour of black locusts that smothered the earth, the sky, even the air he breathed. He walked across that field, barefoot, his skin cracked and festering, tiny locusts emerging from his wounds, leaping and swirling around him like a living black mist. In the distance, something loomed. An ancient gate, towering and rusted, its letters pulsing faintly through the haze. "Welcome to the sins you built yourself." As he stepped closer, voices rose from every direction. Not the voices of ordinary creatures, but the voices of those he had wronged. The shrieks of children from the failed school project. The sobs of mothers from the embezzled disaster relief funds. The hoarse cries of old men who starved because food prices soared beyond reach. The voices piled upon him, spinning, crushing his chest like an unseen weight. When Darmadi reached the gate and touched it, the rusted iron flaked away, transforming into thousands of locusts that surged over his body, crawling into his mouth, his eyes, his ears. He collapsed, writhing like a worm in the black storm. But when he opened his eyes, he was back in his house, or something that resembled his house. The walls were veined with cracks, each one oozing locusts. The sofa, the table, the lamp, all pulsed with life, as if woven from the interlocked bodies of locusts. The air hung thick, reeking of blood and damp earth, a miasma of decay. Darmadi staggered forward. Every step left black footprints on the floor, not mere stains, but throbbing trails, seeping like wounds that would never heal. Through the shattered window, he saw the world outside. The city was gone. Only a void of darkness remained. A wasteland where swarms of locusts twisted into the faint, screaming faces of his past, the victims he had ignored. And from the heart of that wasteland, the whisper returned. "Welcome, Darmadi, to the world you built for yourself." Darmadi mustered the last of his strength. In this shattered, blackened world that now trapped him, he screamed, cursed, and damned everything he could lay blame upon. He ran toward the old gate that had swallowed him earlier, pounding his fists against its rusted iron until his skin split and blood sprayed. I don't deserve this. I've contributed. I built this city. I created jobs. But his words rang hollow, as if sucked into an endless vortex. Around him, the sea of locusts began swirling again, forming living walls, herding him like an animal toward the center of his own ruin. Blind with rage, Darmadi seized a large rock and hurled it at the swarm. The rock struck the ground, and from the cracked earth emerged something. A figure. A grotesque creature, humanoid in shape. Yet its entire body was composed of black locusts clinging together, writhing, breathing in a revolting, unified mass. The figure stepped forward slowly. With each step, the earth darkened further. Its empty eyes locked onto Darmadi, not with anger, but with eternal disappointment. The creature raised its hand, and from its palm, thousands of locusts took flight, surging toward Darmadi. These locusts did not merely devour his flesh. They gnawed at his words, shredded his pride, chewed through every justification he had ever clung to. A bite to his neck, the memory of embezzling school project funds vanished. A bite to his chest, the pride of receiving a falsified award dissolved. A bite to his head, every honorary title he had bought crumbled to nothing in an instant. Darmadi fell to his knees. His hands trembled. His body was riddled with holes, spewing tiny locusts from festering wounds. In desperation, he tried to crawl, searching for an escape. But with every movement, the earth turned to black sludge, swallowing him slowly. And the voice whispered again, now louder, piercing straight into his mind. There is no way back. No exit for you. You are now one of us. That night, or day, or whenever, for time had lost meaning, Darmadi finally understood. He was no longer human. He was a nest for his own sins. He was part of a curse that would never end. Darmadi's body was half buried in the black sludge. The black locusts danced across his exposed skin, carving small holes that steadily widened. His flesh, what little remained, began to crack like drought-stricken earth, left to wither under an endless dry season. Yet strangely, Darmadi could not die. Every bite, every tear, refused to grant him an end, instead forcing him to endure every second of agony. He tried to scream, but his mouth filled with locusts. Every gasp for breath drew not air into his lungs, but living swarms swirling inside him, whispering the sins he once dismissed so lightly. Just a small project, who loses? A little cut, no one will know. The people stay ignorant, as long as there are sweet promises. All his past justifications now turned against him, whips lashing at his soul. In the distance, he saw the city he once took pride in, but now it lay in blackened ruins, collapsed buildings, cracked streets, dead trees, and atop the wreckage, the black locusts formed vague silhouettes. The faces of those whose lives he had destroyed. Children wept soundlessly. Mothers cradled lifeless infants. Old men slumped against fractured walls, empty eyes fixed on the blackened sky. They did not attack Darmadi. They ignored him, as if he wasn't even worthy of their anger. No forgiveness. No judgment. Just slow, silent, eternal erasure. The locust human figure from before approached again. Now larger, more solid, as if nourished by Darmadi's defeat. It bent down, pressing a hand woven from 1,000 writhing locusts against Darmadi's forehead. And then something horrific happened. Darmadi's body began to dissolve into a swarm of black locusts, slowly from his feet upward, his calves, his thighs, his stomach, his chest, and finally, his head. His entire existence unraveled into millions of tiny locusts, swirling into a dark mist that smothered the world. Now, Darmadi no longer existed as a man. He was part of the curse. He was the foul-smelling night wind. He was the whisper in the cracks of old walls. He was the black locust that never left. And in that city, whenever another soul began to gnaw at the rights of its people, the tiny locusts would gather once more, searching for a new body to infest. Time passed. No one truly knew when Darmadi vanished. There was no news in the papers. No official announcement, as if the world had silently agreed to forget he ever existed. Darmadi's grand house was left empty, its gate rusted, its paint peeled, its windows shattered by the night wind. But one thing kept people at a distance: the black grasshoppers. They swarmed around the house day and night. No ordinary grasshoppers, their bodies gleamed unnaturally, darker than darkness itself, and from every corner of the house came the sound. Click, click, click. The skittering of tiny legs dragging across the floor. The village children gave the place a new name. The Nest of Sins. They said if anyone dared get too close, the grasshoppers would follow them home, slipping into their houses, their dreams, their very breath, and bring the same ravenous curse that had swallowed Darmadi. But that wasn't all. The town began to change. Without explanation, the main roads cracked. Construction projects stalled. Water turned murky. The night wind carried a stench that burned the nostrils. People started whispering, "This is retribution for our officials' greed." A curse born from the blood of the people, drained dry for years. Every year, on a certain night, usually when the moon was darkest, the swarm of black grasshoppers would form a strange shape in the sky, a face screaming soundlessly before dissolving into black mist. Some swore they saw that face, and they all described the same one, Darmadisatrio. Now anyone who repeated the same sins, corruption, betrayal of the weak, betrayal of justice, would begin to notice small signs, black grasshoppers at the window, in their pockets, beneath their pillows, a warning, a whisper from the unseen world, and if they ignored it, their nights would soon fill with that skittering sound. Click, 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 gnawing away at their lives just as it had with Darmadi.